After America is made on the lands of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded.
We are in a battle for the soul of America.
This is a fraud on the American public.
Hi, I'm Emma Shortis, and this is After America. On Thursday night US time, Trump gave a national address that he'd billed as explosive. New evidence about rigged elections, foreign interference, blah, blah, blah.
Tonight, I'm announcing the immediate declassification and release of critical intelligence revealing shocking vulnerabilities in our election infrastructure. The Chinese government wanted U.S. president to lose the next election, and the reason they wanted me to lose is because they knew I was wise to them.
Trump lies all the time. We know this. He is obviously brazenly laying the groundwork for the midterm elections, which, all things being equal, the Republicans are on track to lose catastrophically. But all things are not equal. Trump is deliberately undermining what little faith there is left in the American electoral system.
Put together, these disclosures reveal an election system so broken and so vulnerable that no one can possibly defend it. It is not defensible.
What do you do with a system so compromised it is indefensible? Declare an emergency? Sweep it all away?
I have 24 Trump 2028 hats. His folks keep sending me.
And you think he's going to run again?
No, don't give me. Who spends $200 million on a ballroom at their home and then leaves the house?
I have my highest poll numbers that I've ever had. And, based on what I read, I guess I'm not allowed to run. So we'll see what happens.
Johnson says you're trolling when you talk about a third term.
Well, I don't think he said that. I don't think he'd use that term, but it's a very interesting thing. I have the best numbers for any president in many years, any president. And I would say that if you read it, it's pretty clear. I'm not allowed to run. It's too bad. I missed it.
We don't know how far they'll try to push it, nor how successful they'll be. But we do know they've been very successful in undermining and hollowing out the institutions of democracy, such as the media. To talk about the state of the media and more, we're joined this week by Anna Fifield. Anna is a Kiwi journalist and foreign affairs analyst, and we met on my recent trip to Brussels and Berlin. Anna spent more than 20 years as foreign correspondent for the Washington Post and Financial Times, reporting from East Asia, the Middle East, and the United States, and she later served as the Washington Post's Asia-Pacific editor. Anna now runs the newsletter Between Giants, which is dedicated to examining New Zealand's role in the world. Thank you so much for joining us on After America. It's so exciting to have new friends.
Anything for you, Emma, and kia ora from New Zealand.
It's so lovely to have you, and hopefully this is the first of many podcast crossovers between Australia and New Zealand. We'll hold you to that. I wanted to start, Anna, by asking you, of course, you have pretty extensive experience in the American media, especially, given your time at the Washington Post. You've had now a bit of time out of that, and I guess some time to kind of reflect on the state of things. So I wanted to start by asking you, I guess, how you feel, what your sense of the state of media is generally, but particularly media in the US.
Yeah, I feel pretty sad, to be frank about it. I loved the Washington Post so much. I worked there twice. I was there as the Tokyo bureau chief and then the Beijing bureau chief. Then I came home to New Zealand for a couple of years, and I was lucky enough to return to the fold, if still from New Zealand, as the Asia editor. And it was a really fantastic place to work. Incredibly smart, ambitious, collegial people, every day just thinking about, okay, how can we add to the knowledge and understanding about specific things, and how can we be creative and make sure these, important news reaches new audiences. So I felt incredibly lucky to work there. And then it all came crashing down in February this year when the Post laid off maybe as many as 375 journalists, almost, more than a third, almost half of the Washington Post staff in a single day. And this took place against this backdrop of the billionaire owner, Jeff Bezos, increasingly cozying up to Donald Trump and changing the newspaper in ways that he hadn't for the previous 12 years, like saying that opinion pages must be devoted to free markets and personal liberties and other things that kind of jibed with Trumpian vibes. So I think, as an institution, as a paper that had broken Watergate and been there, writing the first draft of so much of American history, it was really devastating to see those kind of layoffs and to see really, I think, what is the gutting of this pillar of democracy, this great institution, not to sound too highfalutin about it all. But it has gutted the Washington Post. There are still journalists that they're doing really great reporting, but many, many fewer of them than previously and many fewer people going to read it. And that's taking place against this backdrop in the United States where we've had other billionaires buying news outlets, most notably recently David Ellison, son of Larry Ellison, the Oracle guy, who has bought CBS News and installed a person who's never worked as an editor-in-chief like that, never run a big company like that, never been in broadcasting, but she is an ideologue and a Trump supporter, and but it's Bari Weiss. She's now there running CBS. And of course, David Ellison is now looking to take over Warner Brothers, including CNN. So not only is there this consolidation of the media going on in the United States, but billionaires with political aims are buying up media outlets and kind of shaping them to their will for their political point scoring or to curry favor with Donald Trump. So it's a pretty depressing situation.
Yeah, it is. And for what it's worth, that's definitely our vibe often on this show, because it is deeply depressing. And it sounds like you think those organizations, media generally, is very vulnerable at the moment.
Yeah, I think it is. And that, there are a lot of great journalists still trying their best at these places. But, if I was there, I wouldn't want to be inside if I had an option, working in this environment and for these people with those aims. So I think that we're seeing so much movement in the media in the US at the moment, and especially from the Washington Post. So many people have gone to some people did go to CNN, but to the New York Times or to the Atlantic. And the thing is, people at the New York Times have been incredible in terms of saying, it's good for all of us to have competition and this very dynamic, pluralistic media. So nobody wants this to have just the New York Times as the only newspaper really left covering all these things. So, or just the Atlantic. So it is, it is not good for democracy as a whole.
No, it's one of the real indicators, I think you're right, of the health of American democracy. As you said, you've been back in New Zealand for a little while now, and New Zealand has always had, I guess, a different relationship with the United States, certainly different to Australia's relationship with the United States. Of course, New Zealand left. It's often said that, New Zealand was kicked out of the ANZUS treaty arrangement, but that's not quite true, is it? New Zealand left, I think, is a better way to describe it.
We took a principled stand.
That's right.
And exited, yes.
A very principled anti-nuclear stance. Again, quite different from Australia's. So that relationship, I think, is worth stating at the outset, is complex, I think, and honest in a way. Often, I think Australia's relationship with the United States is not. How do you think New Zealanders see the United States now, particularly during the second Trump administration and the context of everything you were just talking about?
Yeah, I think people are generally, as with many, many parts of the world, aghast at what Trump is doing, and not just his style, which is obviously unique, quite off-putting in many ways, but the actual things that he's doing. So, a little country like ours at the bottom of the world really relies on the international rules-based order, needs the rules to work. We are not even a middle power in the Mark Carney kind of framework there. We're a small power. So the way that Donald Trump is just flouting so many of the rules, what with his, the capture of Maduro in Venezuela, and obviously the invasion of Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz on multiple occasions, has really, really concerned people here because we depend, as Australia does, on the rules of the sea working properly and well. So I think, people are really shocked by that. And that is not just anecdotal. We had a survey that came out in June this year from the Asian New Zealand Foundation, which does really great work. And every year they do a Perceptions of Asia report. And this year was the first year that it crossed over where it said more New Zealanders saw China as a friend than the United States. So the sense of friendship with the US dropped from 61% last year to 39% this year.
Wow.
Now, more New Zealanders see China as a friend and the US as a threat than any other time before. So this has been a really marked change here. And interestingly, it's happening at the same time as we are led by this quite pro-American government. Our Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, is a former Unilever executive. He lived in the United States for 6 years. He talks all the time about how much he loves the US. He presided over a foreign policy reset in 2023 when he came to power that's much more focused on traditional allies and partners like the United States and Australia. So they have been leading this change anyway, but Winston Peters, the foreign minister and the populist New Zealand First leader, is also
he's
quite
the character, hey?
Indeed, another character. And very pro-American as well, and so has been multiple times to Washington and, is very supportive of the Trump administration. And, I mean, he's a little more reticent than Luxon. It emerged through reporting this year that Prime Minister Luxon actually wanted to follow Albanese's footsteps and support explicitly what Trump had done with Iran, but that Winston Peters pulled him back and said, we basically said nothing.
Okay, that's so interesting. And how then, Anna, is it? And this is a question we're asking about the Australian government all the time. How are they navigating that kind of pro-America stance and that quite dramatic shift in public opinion? Like, is there acknowledgement of that? Or
not so much, I would say. And it has been coupled at the same time with a sharpening of the rhetoric around China. So if the government is looking at the two main part, the economic partner and the security guarantor, there has been a bit more hedging going on there, I would say, and more criticism of China. So they're balancing these two things in the public discourse, but always, trying to portray the United States as a whole, as a long-standing friend, a mature relationship. Nobody talks about ANZUS really here. Funnily enough. They're talking more about the US as a whole rather than Trump in particular and the Trump administration.
Yeah. We get that too. I am pretty sick of hearing about how the relationship is bigger than presidents or single presidents or single prime ministers. It's true, but also it's a get out of jail card.
It's very convenient.
Yeah. You mentioned China there, of course, Anna, and New Zealand's relationship with China and I guess a ratcheting up of the rhetoric around China. How is the government navigating that relationship, do you think? Where is that at?
Yeah, for the longest time, in fact, for about 16 years, New Zealand has been really, really careful with how it talks about China because, we signed our FTA with them in 2008, and that has led to this enormous export boom to China, underpinned so much of our economic growth in all these primary products like milk powder and meat and logs and all of these kinds of things. And so the successive governments have been quite timid, I would say, in criticizing anything that China does, no matter how diplomatically or obliquely. We've joined a few statements when it comes to Hong Kong and the repression in Xinjiang. But we have, our foreign ministers have been nowhere near as outspoken or even as regular in their statements as Penny Wong and successive Australian foreign ministers have been. But that has started to shift a little bit, again, because Winston Peters is quite hawkish on China, and the facts are changing on the ground there, so that there has been more criticism of what China has been doing. And we've seen the result of that in that China is paying much more attention to us. When there was a big, North Korea sanctions enforcement mission earlier this year, which multiple countries, including Australia and New Zealand, were part of, the Chinese government criticised New Zealand only. And then more recently, we saw a group of New Zealand parliamentarians, backbenchers, going to Taiwan in the same way that parliamentarians from many countries go to Taiwan, and we were singled out for that. The 4 backbenchers were criticised, asked to apologise, and hit with a 1-year travel ban from going to China or Hong Kong. So it does seem like things are really moving in that relationship. And just how this plays out, I think everybody's moving quite anxiously, timidly, because we don't want to upset, as other countries have found out, we don't want to upset China and risk economic retribution. We look at what happened to Australia, we look at what happened to Canada, and now what is happening with Japan, and don't want to risk that ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, you've spoken about, or we've spoken about a fair bit, the economic reliance that New Zealand has on China, particularly for the export market, the primary products market, as you just mentioned. While we were away, you spoke quite a bit about, I guess, the longer term prospects for that economic relationship. And I guess, what is it fair to say, what you see as complacency around that relationship?
Yeah, I actually think it is, because our economic relationship with China has served us really well since 2008. It has been great for the giant dairy industry, which is very influential here in Wellington. They have a lot of sway. And so that is almost like, no pun intended, the sacred cow in the New Zealand economy that cannot be touched. So it really struck me because Australia sells so much to China, and particularly so much that China needs and can't get elsewhere, like all the iron ore and coal and other minerals that you export. And when China retaliated against Australia a few years ago, of course, they hit things that they could easily substitute, like wine and lobsters and barley. With New Zealand, if they hit us, it will be very easy for them because we sell them things that they can get in a whole bunch of other places. So I do think we are quite vulnerable to economic retaliation from China if they decide to stop buying one product, even if it's just logs. That would really devastate the forestry industry here. So I think they have a lot of power. But when I speak to people at Fonterra or other primary commodity exporters in New Zealand, they're always like, oh no, it's going to be great. Well, China loves us. They're going to keep buying our products. We're moving up the value chain. We're selling them cream cheese now as well as cream and cheese. And so that's the thing that really struck me during our trip to Germany is that, the German car makers were thinking the same thing in 2015 when China came out with its big industrial plan of Made in China 2025, and they wanted to be a world leader in high advanced technology and robotics and chemicals and all of these things. And as we heard a lot, the car industry in particular was like, as if China could ever compete with us on quality. And then here we are, we've just been on this trip and discovered that, Germany is losing maybe 10,000 jobs a month in big part because of Chinese deindustrialization there. So that sense of hubris and that sense of underestimating China, I think serves nobody well. We should all be on tenterhooks thinking about how do we make sure that we occupy niches or do things that China can't compete with, or how do we get ahead of that game so that we can't be shut out in the same way that, the problems that Volkswagen and BASF are having now in Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that, and again, we've talked about this quite a bit, not only doing that kind of forecasting work and actually, listening to what China is saying, because, they've said this openly, that, they want food security and food independence, and they can achieve it. And I mean, I don't know how you'll feel about being aligned with our former Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, but he's just gone on Ezra Klein this week to say exactly the same thing. Never underestimate don't underestimate China. So, you're not alone.
I started
there.
that podcast. I've pushed pause for now. It's a very long podcast.
Oh, God, don't do it, Anna. Don't.
An
You've
hour
had it all
45, I believe. Yeah.
No,
yeah, but that's the thing. China has said they want to be, food self-sufficient. And that's extremely difficult. I mean, they're all getting there or already there on rice and other grains. It's extremely difficult on dairy, but we shouldn't underestimate them. They've said this is what we want to do. Even if they can replace, a quarter of their dairy imports with stuff that they've produced at home, that will have a devastating impact on our dairy industry, your dairy industry, Danish, German, other countries that sell dairy products to China. So yeah, we should listen to what they say and take them seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I would also add, do the work at home. Like there's so much focus on, not unjustly, there's focus on, China and where China's heading, and particularly in Europe, focus on responses on whether it's tariffs or targeted work. But, I think a reluctance to do the hard structural investment work at home as well that can build that kind of resilience and security. And for me, in Australia, that includes investing in diplomacy and that kind of work as well, which is critical to the relationship. And that's where I wanted to go with you now to ask about New Zealand's diplomacy and particularly New Zealand's role in diplomacy in the Pacific and how China's or New Zealand's relationship with China is or isn't affecting New Zealand's approach to the broader region.
That's a great question and very topical, obviously. I've been sitting here in Wellington watching Penny Wong on a diplomatic frenzy through the Pacific and this latest trip that Albanese and Wong did to Fiji and signed these agreements, which seem to take a lot of people by surprise here.
This is a clear affirmation of Australia's sustained commitment to the stability, resilience, and prosperity of the Blue Pacific region at a time of global uncertainty.
As regional leaders, we take seriously our responsibility to strengthen sovereignty, peace and stability in our region.
It's really striking how active Australia has been and, using rugby league as a diplomatic tool and just being a bit more creative, I think is fascinating. And it makes me think, what are we doing? Yes, we continue to talk to them. We've had this kind of strong-arming relationship a little bit with the Cook Islands over the past year and a half or so since they cut a security deal with China that, breached the terms of our relationship with them. But, I was surprised that New Zealand was invited to join this agreement with Australia and Fiji once it's all ratified and that we weren't actually part of it in the first place, given that the three of us do have close relationships and there's not going to be that much daylight, I think, between Australia and New Zealand on the approach to Fiji. So I'm surprised that wasn't trilateral from the get-go. And yeah, look, Winston Peters in particular, our octogenarian finance minister in his third term as foreign minister, has paid a lot of attention to the Pacific. He's been, I think, to every Pacific country, including to Palau twice in his term. But it seems like there's a lot of that personal diplomacy going on, but we haven't seen the kind of tangible results that the kind of things that Australia is doing with the Pacific and building out that relationship and making it more equal or more not just about trade, but a full, full spectrum relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does seem like Australian Pacific diplomacy is evolving in that direction, which is really positive. I think that it seems to be gaining some depth rather than kind of platitudes around our Pacific family and just countering China. So that is quite positive. I wanted to stick, I guess, with that sort of comparison between Australia and Kiwi diplomacy on a more personal note, I guess, because when we were together in Berlin, we went to the New Zealand embassy there for Matariki, the Maori New Year celebration. And I mean, it was beautiful. Like I've had very little experience of Kiwi diplomacy in that way. And it was deeply moving, the way that the ambassador, in fact, everybody in the formalities spoke Te Reo Māori, the way there was a song performed, and the way that the diplomatic staff did that was so warm and so generous, and clearly wasn't like perfunctory. Like they were doing it with evident pride and warmth. And it was beautiful, as I said, and deeply moving. But the other Australian guy, Rob, and I on this trip kind of looked at each other and were like, what are we doing? Like, this is such an opportunity missed for Australia. There's been noises, I guess, about Indigenous diplomacy within the department, but, it was kind of, at least from the outside, it looked a bit perfunctory and not done, in, I guess, in the spirit of what I saw in Berlin. And maybe this is kind of self-indulgent of me, but like I felt a bit ashamed that we are so bad at this, especially, in light of the catastrophic failure of the referendum in Australia and the damage that has done, the way it has set back those relations so dramatically. But that's easy for me to say from outside. We've talked about there's quite a conservative government in New Zealand. So I guess I just wanted to ask, how you felt about that, your experience of Kiwi diplomacy, if I'm like totally missing the mark or...
No. And in fact, it was really great to be there with you and other Australians on our trip and to see your response to it, because that's kind of standard for me now, that we see things like this often, because this sense that we are a bicultural nation and that our Māori culture should be embedded in everything we do is pretty universal now. I would just say, the government that we have at the moment, and particularly one in particular, minor coalition partner, junior coalition partner, ACT, has tried to roll back some of these things and some of the treaty principles that are, embedded in our culture and our society, but those efforts have been kind of resolutely pushed back. The submissions on this bill that they put into Parliament to reinterpret some of the treaty principles was pushed back 99%. So this is a generational thing in particular in New Zealand, that we have a real sense of bicultural identity. So what you saw at the embassy, I think, was really genuine and the kind of thing I would expect to see. And in fact, every New Zealand ambassador like that has a korowai, a cloak made of feathers for them to wear to ceremonial occasions like this. Everybody would be expected to be able to do a mihi, a greeting in Māori, and to be able to sing waiata songs like you saw. So you saw all of the embassy staff up there singing and somebody playing the guitar, but you probably also saw Kiwis like me in the audience singing along too, because we know those songs. So it is, and especially since I was away for 20 years and I come back to New Zealand, it is really, really beautiful to see how ingrained in our culture this has become and how standard it has become. It would actually be a political statement not to do a greeting in Māori if you were somewhere in New Zealand now. So I think this is a hugely positive development in New Zealand. And actually something, we're not doing it transactionally, but it's something that stands us good stead in our diplomacy, obviously in the Pacific, because there is so much in common with Polynesian cultures in particular. But there are lots of kind of intangible, untranslatable words in Māori language that and concepts that are shared in, like I think of Japan, there's a word manakitanga in Māori, which is like caring, hospitality basically, and there's a word in Japanese, which is kind of the same. So I think that there are lots of crossovers, and it helps us explain ourselves in the world a little bit better. So I encourage Australia on your own journey. It's a journey for us. We're still very much on this journey, but I think that it does make us more inclusive and representative, and it affects how we show up in the world and how people respond to us.
Yeah, and like I said, that was so evident. Like you could genuinely feel that, as we were there, and it's such a beautiful model, I think, to be so proud of.
Yeah.
At the risk of playing woke bingo, Anna, I wanted to just ask you, we've been on this trip, like we both spend a lot of time talking about security, about international relations, about like really blokey stuff. It's an area like many that's still very dominated by men and kind of masculine ideas, like particularly in this Trump era, like where we literally have Pete Hegseth talking about doing testosterone tests for the US military. Like, I know.
It's about restoring and optimizing your natural capabilities, protecting your longevity, and ensuring you have the biological foundation required to sustain the fight.
Like, how that's not a joke is kind of beyond me. But I guess I just, wanted to ask you, particularly, I learned so much from you on this trip. But, the fact that you told me that the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, can't live in New Zealand anymore. Like, it's too dangerous for her because of COVID. But clearly gender plays a role in that. Like, that is deeply shocking. So I guess I just wanted to ask you about kind of being a woman in this space, being a woman in New Zealand, and how you see the way that gender is playing out in the space that we both live in.
Yeah. Well, I would say, Jacinda Ardern, I think she's in her early 40s now. She lives in Sydney. And the former mayor of Wellington, Tori Whanau, who is a Māori woman, also young in her early 40s, lives in Melbourne. Because the environment in New Zealand for both of them, I mean, I can't speak for them, obviously, but you can draw conclusions that they were both subject to a lot of misogynistic hate, criticism while they were in New Zealand, and Tori Whanau kind of racism as well as misogyny, and the kind of scrutiny that is applied to women and women of colour in the public eye like that is just unconscionable, and the pressure and scrutiny that they come under. If I was a young woman in New Zealand, and especially a young woman of colour, I would be really thinking very, very deeply about whether to run for public office. It just wouldn't be worth it. So I think this is an enormous change in New Zealand, that a lot of it has its genesis in COVID and the misinformation, disinformation that went at that time, that flew around about vaccines in particular. And we had a vaccine mandate in New Zealand. That's what sparked a lot of this backlash against Jacinda Ardern, which continues to this day. So I think that's really, really concerning and something that people are paying attention to here. In the security analyst space, I mean, there aren't very many people in New Zealand working on these issues. But I think, it's not half-half, but women are really quite well represented here. When I think of the CEO of the Asian New Zealand Foundation, the head of research, security professors at Massey University, a Pacific expert, there are women in the public eye and with a public voice. So I think that it's relatively well represented here. And one of the things that I was really happy to see, in fact, commented on when we were in Brussels, we went into one of those meetings about trade, and everybody on the other side of the table was female. And I said, I made some joke about this, and then a man did arrive to sit on their side of the table. But I think, it is notable when things like that happen. It's also very notable when it doesn't. And there was that famous photo from the summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping a few months ago, where on both sides of the table, both Chinese and American, it was all men. So there is definitely a long way to go there, but that we as women in the sector can, hopefully make a path for people and amplify the voices of young women who are coming up, making sure that they have a seat at the table and that they feel confident to raise their voices, because I think we need all sorts of perspectives and worldviews coming into these difficult conversations.
Now more than ever. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for all the work that you do in that space and for being so generous with your time and your analysis. We appreciate it so much, and we really do hope you'll come back.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Emma. I learned so much from you on the trip as well, and continue to. So thank you for having me on. I'm delighted.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Anna. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back with another episode next week. The latest Vantage Point essay from Australia Institute Press is available for pre-order now. Australians are constantly told that we can't afford better schools and hospitals, yet our governments give away billions of dollars worth of gas to multinational companies every year. In More Fool Me, How the Gas Industry Tricked Australia, Australia Institute co-CEO Richard Dennis pulls back the curtain on the gas industry, and he outlines the simple steps we can take to fix this mess. Pre-order More Fool Me now for just $19.95. Or you can subscribe to the Vantage Point series for just $64.95 to get 4 engaging essays a year. For a limited time only, pod listeners can use the code FOOLME, that's FOOLME, to receive a free copy of Richard's book Econobabble, along with your Vantage Point subscription. Visit australiainstitute.org.au/store to pre-order now. This episode was recorded on Friday the 17th of June. After America is supported by the Andrew Farron Foundation and produced by Angus Blackman. I'm Emma Shortis. Thanks for listening.